Hello, and welcome back to our discussions. Today, we're going to be talking about why people move west after the Civil War. So, it's important for us to understand that new opportunities and technological advances led to westward expansion. Okay, so all those new opportunities for things like land ownership and to get out of the crowded cities in the East led to more and more people moving to the western part of the United States after the Civil War. There are also some key technological advances that make it easier to live in the western part of the United States after the Civil War. And one of those major technological advances is the railroad and the steam engine. Okay, so if you're living out in the West in an area like the Great Plains, before the Civil War, the Great Plains wasn't well connected to the eastern states. So people living in the Great Plains, they couldn't sell, their cattle beef if they wanted to an area in the east, or they couldn't get building supplies shipped out to their homes in the Great Plains so they could build buildings and homes. Okay, but once the railroad track gets expanded to the west, into the western part of the United States after the Civil War, it's going to make it a lot easier for those people in the West to import goods into their towns and export goods into their towns. So it really speeds up the transportation of goods and people from the western part of the United States to the eastern part of the United States, which is going to pull a lot of people to the West. Okay, so like I was saying, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for land ownership. The Homestead Act of 1862 is going to promise 160 acres of free land to anyone that would farm it for 5 years. So a lot of people living in the East are going to want to become farmers. Okay, farming is a very profitable industry in the 1800s. But land is going to be very expensive in some places like Pennsylvania and New York. And the government offers a really, really good deal with the Homestead Act of 1862. Okay, for those people that can't afford that want land in the eastern part of the United States but can't afford to buy it, they're going to take advantage of this opportunity, get 160 acres of land, farm it for 5 years, and they don't even have to pay for it as long as they're developing that land and they're turning it into something. Because that's what our national government's true goal is. Okay? They want to develop the land in the western part of the United States. It's part of the United States, but it's not really being used to its full extent during this time. And this act helps that land to reach its potential as becoming a big part of the U.S. economy. So what types of industries become profitable among the Great Plains as a result of this act being passed? Well, wheat farming. So wheat farmers in the Great Plains begin to make a lot of money, and beef cattle raising in the western part of the United States becomes a very profitable industry as a result of people taking advantage of this opportunity to get 160 acres of land for free. So like I was saying, there are also major technological advances, including the development of the Transcontinental Railroad. So the Transcontinental Railroad is a railroad system that extends from the eastern part of the United States the whole way to the western part of the United States, the whole way to California. So it's going to be constructed between the years of 1863 through 1869. So it starts about halfway through the Civil War, and it's unable to be finished until after the Civil War is over. And it begins being constructed when the Union begins winning the Civil War. And when it's finished in 1869, right at the tail end of the Reconstruction era, a golden spike is going to be put through to combine the Pacific Railroad to the rest of the Eastern Railroad, which will And once that spike's put through, it's going to signify the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which connects the western part of our country's railroad to the eastern part of our country's railroad. And that's going to be officially finished on May 10th, 1869. Okay, so there's a little video there. If you want to watch that on your own time, it is on the Transcontinental Railroad. We will watch it during our discussion in class. And a lot of people are going to want to move to the western parts of the country in hopes of finding gold and silver. So in 1848, before the Civil War, gold is found in California, in this modern-day area of San Francisco. And word of this gold spreads all throughout the United States. Okay, so a lot of people are going to move to San Francisco in 1849 as a result of the word spreading that gold has been found there. And people hear of the gold in the San Francisco area from not only the United States, but from all over the world. So a lot of people from Asia are going to move to the San Francisco area as well in search of gold. Yeah, they're hoping to, when they move there, to find gold or silver, and that will lead to them getting rich quick, because gold has always been a valuable resource throughout history. So the California gold rush, it takes place between 1848 and 1855. Like I said, a majority of people moved to the area in 1849 in search of gold. So that's why they're referred to as the gold seekers, or the 49ers. Okay. And it's going to bring 300,000 people to the California area from not only all over the United States, but all over the world in hopes of obtaining that wealth. Okay. A lot of them never find gold, but they end up staying because they like the area. And they go into other businesses. Like, for instance, if you've ever heard of the Ghirardelli Chocolate Company, that company was founded in 1849 by someone who originally moved in the area hoping to find gold. They didn't find gold, but they realized cacao grew well in the California area, and they started their own chocolate company. And they made their fortune that way. There's another major gold rush, but it occurs more in the Midwest and the Rocky Mountain region. It's referred to as the Pikes Peak or Bust Gold Rush, and it occurred in Kansas, Nebraska, and the Colorado territories between 1859 and 1861 before the outbreak of the Civil War. So a lot of people are going to move into these areas before the outbreak of the Civil War, searching for gold. And they're going to find a good bit of it. And then a lot of African Americans, upon being freed from slavery, are going to want to move west because they desire a new beginning for their families. Okay. They want to forget about the harsh realities of slavery and the discrimination that's still in the South. And from what I've read, discrimination is still going on in the western part of the United States during this time, but it's to a much lesser extent, okay, than it is in the southern part of the United States, especially during the Reconstruction era. So African Americans, they want to move out west to avoid those Jim Crow laws, those segregation laws, being discriminated against. Remember, all those things are going on heavily in the southern part of the United States. And they want to forget about being held captive in slavery. Some of them had very, very tough lives as slaves. And then a lot of people are going to move west just because they desire adventure. Okay, so there's this great sense of adventure in moving west after the Civil War. So people desire, new beginnings. They want to get out of their crowded towns, and they're tired of their routine lives being lived in the eastern states, and they desire something new. And some people want to prove that they can make it on their own without their family members and their friends helping them out in the eastern states. They want to go and look for gold and hopes of obtaining wealth through, as I just said, gold, silver, and some even participate in bank robbing since the laws are loosely enforced in the West. So a lot of these Western towns after the Civil War, they're gaining population very, very fast. So oftentimes there's, one sheriff in charge of enforcing the law in a town, and that one sheriff gets overwhelmed because the town's growing drastically in population. So crime tends to be loosely enforced. So there's a lot of successful bank robbing. There's some people that move west to defend all the Western settlers from Native American attacks, because as more, and we'll talk more about this, as more and more people, U.S. citizens, move from the east to the west, they begin taking over Native American homelands. The Native Americans are unhappy about that, so they begin attacking the Western settlers. And the United States Army eventually gets sent out to protect the Western settlers, and people from the east move out, from the eastern part of the United States, move out to the west to protect all those settlers. Okay. So people want to prove that they're individuals and they can rely on themselves for their living. And as I said, there's a lot of violence that some Americans see as exciting that's occurring in the West, whether it be, fights with Indians or, bank robbing. The old Western draw was a way that they'd solve crimes or disputes between two parties or arguments between people. So there's a lot of, so how did the West during this time get the name the Wild West? Well, there was a lot of violence going on and law was passively enforced. Okay, so that'll do it for our discussion today. Nice and short and sweet. In our next discussion, we'll be talking about how the Western expansion of the United States impacts the lives of Native Americans. But until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.